what's a cortex?
It's cortex means bark. It's from the Latin word that means bark, like not roof bark.
Like on a tree.
Yeah, on a tree, not dog. Yeah. So it's the thin outer layer of your brain. It's like, I think 6 credit cards high is like the way they describe it.
Really?
Yeah, and I think you unwrap it like napkin sized. You know.
I'm so glad I asked you that, because look here, I want to show you. When I knew we were going to talk about this, I went and I found an image of the prefrontal cortex, but I'm a very literal person. So see, here, when I look at this image of I thought it was the whole thing, like all the way down deep through that whole front part of the brain.
Nah, it's like all the undulations. The way that your brain managed to get all that goodness in there is by scrunching it up like a napkin. So when you see people who aren't like, the less of the gyri and stuff that you see, the less cognitive functioning the person probably is doing.
Because greater surface area, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, here so this image of the prefrontal cortex would be the forward area of the brain, about 6 credit cards deep. Yeah. From the topmost layer downward.
Yep.
And then there are other real estate areas beneath that are responsible for other things.
Yep. Like subcortical. Yeah.
Okay. And that would be the term, is the subcortical.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See, this is great. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Yeah, okay. There's like 8 different terms, but yeah. Because your limbic system and all that other stuff is in there.
Okay. Help me out with the next part. Manny, why is this particular image separated into dorsolateral and orbital frontal?
Orbital frontal is more like self-related, emotional type self stuff. Dorsolateral is higher order. I think of it like processing, like lateral prefrontal, dorsolateral. It's more advanced cognitive processing. One rule of thumb that I use with the brain is that usually when you're dealing with ventral regions, you're dealing with emotional aspects. When you're dealing with the dorsal regions, you're dealing with the cognitive, like what they call the cold versus the hot cognition processes. Not all the time now. Like, don't go cutting your brain open and like pointing to stuff and being like, I'm tickling this and it's not doing what Manny said. But it's a rule of thumb you can use.
Okay. So this area of the brain, we've shown it to people now. I want to get a little more focused on the kind of conceptual stuff. So you tell us, like, what do you think is important for people to understand about the prefrontal cortex?
The PFC is home of all psych diseases. This is your, it's home of executive function. Now, your prefrontal cortex modulates the amygdala. We discussed that a bit in the last section about the amygdala. Your prefrontal cortex tells your amygdala, chill out a little bit, chill out, so that your memories can get into your hippocampus. Now, one of the things that I conceptualize is that the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC, is sort of where your self-esteem lives. Like, when you're in a situation of threat, until you decide that it's uncontrollable threat, your VMPFC, which is your ventral prefrontal cortex, will tell your kind of hold your amygdala at bay, so that your hippocampus is actually encoding the autobiographical memory. Yeah, it tells basically it's self-control. It's like pulling back other memories. It's valuing the outcome possibilities, goal-directed behavior. What else? Social functioning.
So it sounds to me like, and I know this is very crude, but just to help start creating meaning, it sounds to me like the prefrontal cortex is a little bit more about thinking, whereas when we talked in the last episode about the amygdala, that was a little bit more instinctual, a little more about just feeling.
Yeah, the amygdala, don't say feeling,
okay,
because that's a higher level of processing. It's more about doing.
Okay.
It's about
Real instinctual.
yeah, like we have a series over at Mindful 360 called the Amygdala Hijack series, and it's about things like getting where the amygdala hijack is a system of destroying your emotional intelligence, giving you numbers or stuff where your brain is just like, wow, I'm worried. Like the Island News Network is one example of that. Like the fact that we get global news now, and every day we hear about one murder, and we're like, it's not safe in my neighborhood. Well, it's one murder in a country of lots and lots of people statistically.
Right.
You know? So the amygdala doesn't deal with stuff like that was rare. The amygdala just deals with, I heard about it, now I'm worried.
Okay.
Prefrontal cortex would be like cognitive reappraisal, which is a very important part of functioning, managing processes, deciding what information is believable, managing your emotions. Yeah, just empathy. Empathy is a very important part of like that prefrontal area. Yeah.
And so empathy, that's a great example too. Like, so empathy is it's a real thinking process. You have to take the time to think about what it would be like to be in another person's situation.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot more thinking going on here. Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to start throwing questions at you about that more process-driven stuff that's occurring there, but that's later for us. So I want to stay more on the beginning aspects of getting people to just understand this area of the brain. Is there anything else that you feel like would be good to include on that basic level of understanding this part of the brain?
Yep. One thing to consider as it relates to the amygdala is when you're threatening, when you're super afraid, there's a cascade of glucocorticoids, just inflammatory stuff, related stuff, between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. Well, I think prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, so that now you're not sending signals that modulate the amygdala. So it might be just in that area, both outgoing. All these things are like highly interconnected, by the way. So I'm trying to like.
Yeah, that's what I was going to kind of remind people. Hopefully they've seen the last video where, again, you really cautioned people to keep remembering that the parts are all, not always all affecting each other, but very often affecting each other. So there's this kind
of big electrochemical soup.
Yeah.
We humans like to point to stuff and give it a name. It's like rainbow, and you're like, point to the red. Red.
Right.
You gotta give red some room to breathe.
Yeah.
And if you go in there and like we talked about the visual cortex in a previous episode, and how at times auditory stimulation was triggering the visual cortex. Remember previous episode?
Yep.
It's because we're giving names to things so that they can make sense to us. We're abstracting electrochemical clusters of events. Hopefully that ain't over geek it, but yeah.
All right. So that's just a big theme that I want to keep reminding people about, is to not be, and I'm very linear and concrete, so I tend to want to do that too. I want to say, come on, Manny, tell me that, this is my hand, and my hand does these, and kind of do that with the brain. And I get what you're saying, that we have to think about how these things really are interconnected and contribute to the processes that occur, by working in unison and affecting each other. So you guys remember that too, that as we keep doing these, they're not islands in the stream, right? So
you're not gonna sing to me, are you?
No.
I was like, sail away with you to another. Yeah.